Have you ever, laid awake at night just staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing a conversation in a foreign language?
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
Right, and you have the vocabulary perfectly lined up, the grammar is flawless. I mean, in your own mind, you're practically a poet.
Yeah, you sound amazing in your head.
Exactly. But then, the next morning, the very moment you actually have to open your mouth and speak to a real human being, you just freeze.
The words just completely vanish into thin air.
Yeah.
It is incredibly frustrating. And it's actually a phenomenon that almost every single language learner experiences at some point.
Yeah, and the most important thing you need to know right now, listening to this, is that this is not because you aren't smart enough. And it is definitely not because you didn't study hard enough.
No, not at all.
So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are talking about unlocking your voice, and we have an incredibly diverse stack of sources today.
We really do. It's a huge mix.
Yeah, we've pulled together everything from practical language learning YouTube channels, English Unleashed, Speak Confident English, Bookish English, along with British Council advice, and even Wikipedia's neurobiological breakdown of foreign language anxiety.
Also known as xenoglossophobia, which is a very intimidating word for a very common problem.
Seriously. And we're even tying all of that together with ancient Stoic philosophy and, of all things, presentation techniques from Slide Model.
That's quite the combination.
It is, because our mission today is to uncover exactly why our brains just betray us when we try to speak a new language. And more importantly, how we can systematically rewire our minds and bodies to, unlock our voices with unstoppable confidence.
And to start that rewiring process, we really have to look under the hood. I mean, we have to take the blame off of your intellect and place it where it actually belongs, which is on your biology.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the research makes a very clear distinction here, right? The fear of speaking a new language isn't just some fleeting, insecure emotion. It's a literal physiological event.
Yes, exactly. In a language learning context, your brain is literally triggering a fight-or-flight survival mode.
Wait, like an actual survival response?
An actual survival response. It goes incredibly deep. Functional MRI studies give us a real-time picture of this. When anxious learners try to process a second language, the scans show severe hyperactivity in the amygdala.
Okay, and the amygdala is?
It's your brain's ancient threat detection center. So when it goes into overdrive, it actively inhibits the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Wait, let me stop you right there. In non-neuroscientist terms, that dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, that's basically the brain's grammar and vocabulary engine, right?
Yeah, basically. It's responsible for your executive function. So it handles planning, organizing your thoughts, retrieving specific words.
Right.
So when the amygdala detects a threat, it essentially cuts the power to that part of the brain. Your body decides that conjugating a verb is completely irrelevant when you are supposedly in mortal danger.
Oh, wow. So when that happens, that's when you start feeling those visceral physical symptoms, right?
Exactly.
Like the sweaty palms, the racing heart, the tunnel vision. Your body is just physically betraying your intellect.
And the chemical cascade makes it so much worse. I mean, comparative studies show that...
So a sudden shift to the right hemisphere. Does that mean the brain is physically trying to pull us away from the interaction?
Spot on. It is a neural signal to withdraw. Your brain is literally preparing your body to retreat from the conversation.
That is wild.
And this cognitive interference, it disrupts communication at 3 distinct stages.
Okay, what are they?
First is the input stage. Your anxiety is so loud that you don't even process what the other person is saying to you. Like your mind goes entirely blank while you are supposedly listening.
Oh, I've definitely been there. You're just nodding and smiling, but nothing is going in.
Right. Then comes the processing stage. Your working memory is so overwhelmed by the panic that you can't figure out the grammar or the syntax.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, the output stage, where you just open your mouth and freeze. You're trapped in that agonizing tip of the tongue moment.
So the sources call this dual task cognitive birding. Is that basically like a computer crashing because you have way too many heavy programs open at the exact same time?
That's a perfect analogy, yeah.
Like, on one side, your brain is trying to find words, check grammar, nail the pronunciation. But on the other side, it's managing a racing heart, worrying about judgment, dealing with raw fear. So the system just crashes.
It completely crashes.
So when my mind goes blank, it's not because I forgot the vocabulary. It's because my brain has literally locked the filing cabinet to prepare me to fight a tiger.
That paints the perfect picture. And what is fascinating here is that this neural interference proves the freezing is a pure biological stress response.
Yeah.
Your body has prioritized immediate survival over language production.
But okay, let's pause on that because there is no actual tiger in a coffee shop when you're just trying to like order a cappuccino in Italian.
It's true. No physical tiger.
Right. So if there's no physical threat, what in the world is the brain perceiving as so dangerous that it needs to shut down my vocabulary engine?
Well, this is where we have to move from internal biology to external social pressures. Because the threat isn't physical, it is social and psychological. We are deeply social creatures. And the core trigger here is the fear of negative evaluation. The idea of being judged, sounding foolish, or being misunderstood, it triggers that primal evolutionary fear of being cast out of the group.
Ah, because back in the day, being cast out of the tribe meant death.
Exactly. And our brains really haven't quite updated that software yet.
And for some learners, the cognitive load is even heavier, right? Because the research brings up this concept of stereotype threat.
Oh, yes. That's a huge factor.
Like if you belong to a marginalized group, you might carry this extra invisible burden of worrying that any mistake you make will somehow confirm negative beliefs about your entire group.
Right.
So your anxiety spikes because you feel like you are representing way more than just yourself. That's a massive amount of background processing to handle while you're just trying to speak a sentence.
It adds incredible weight to every single syllable. And this also ties into concepts from our sources like diglossia and linguistic insecurity.
Right, where a minority language exists alongside a dominant prestige language.
Exactly. In those societies, speaking your native language or struggling with a dominant one can make you a target for social demotion or even outright hostility. The threat there is very real. It's external, and it's historically rooted.
That makes a lot of sense.
But even beyond those complex societal power dynamics, there is just the sheer psychological exhaustion of cross-cultural code switching.
Because speaking a new language isn't just swapping out Spanish vocabulary words for English ones. You actually have to adopt new behaviors and completely new social norms.
Right. Think about the mechanics of a conversation. You might come from a culture that highly values indirectness, or where avoiding eye contact is a sign of deep respect.
Sure.
But now you are learning a language where intense directness and sustained eye contact are the baseline expectation. Adopting those behaviors can feel incredibly inauthentic.
Like you're playing a character.
Yes. It creates a massive identity conflict.
Yeah.
Your brain sort of rebels against it because it feels like you're pretending to be someone else.
Which perfectly explains why learners will sometimes suddenly retreat to their native language, their L1, right in the middle of a sentence.
Exactly. It acts as a psychological safety valve. When the threat to your face or your identity becomes too high, reverting to your native tongue just relieves the emotional tension.
It just releases the pressure.
It does. And understanding these social triggers highlights a really crucial concept from the sources: the difference between a skill gap and a trust gap.
Okay, break that down for us.
Well, a skill gap simply means there is actual vocabulary or grammar that you just haven't learned yet. You genuinely need to hit the books.
Okay. But what about the trust gap? Because if you can have an entire, perfectly fluent philosophical conversation with yourself in the shower.
Which we all do.
Right. But then you stutter and use baby words in front of a barista. Is that the ultimate proof that you're suffering from a trust gap, not a skill gap?
It absolutely is. The knowledge is in your brain, but fear has created a wall of self-doubt.
Wow.
And that wall leads to what researchers call the silent spiral.
The silent spiral? That sounds ominous. What is that?
It's when anxious speakers start obsessively over-editing their speech before it even leaves their mouths. So they use much shorter sentences. They use incredibly simple vocabulary that is far below their actual proficiency level.
All just to stay safe.
Exactly, just to avoid making a visible error. But by trying so hard not to be misunderstood, they actually become far less expressive and far less clear.
So they are actively degrading their own performance out of this misguided sense of perfectionism. They're doing the damage themselves.
It is a tragic irony. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of how communication actually works, native speakers rarely care about grammatical precision in everyday casual conversation.
Really? They don't care if I use the wrong verb tense.
Honestly, no. They value efficiency and human connection. They listen for keywords and context to grasp your overall meaning. If you use the wrong verb tense, they usually just autocorrect it in their heads and wait for you to finish your thought.
So our fear of harsh critical judgment is largely entirely self-imposed.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so if the threat is almost entirely based on our internal perception of judgment, how do we rewire that perception? Because we can't just tell our brains to, stop being afraid.
Right, that never works.
No. So this is where our stack of research takes this brilliant detour into ancient philosophy. We have to fundamentally change how we frame reality, and Stoicism offers a surprisingly practical tool set for this.
The connection actually makes perfect sense when you dive into it. The author, Ward Farnsworth, lays out the first principle of practical Stoicism, which is we don't react to events, we react to our judgments about them.
Okay, so making a grammar mistake in public isn't inherently bad or embarrassing. The mistake is just like a sound wave vibrating in the air.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. The feeling of shame only exists because we internally judge that sound wave as a personal failure.
Exactly. And to actively dismantle that judgment, we can borrow a framework popularized by Tim Ferriss called fear setting.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, it's directly inspired by the Stoic practice of premeditating evils. Instead of just vaguely worrying that something terrible will happen if you speak, you force yourself to clearly define the absolute worst-case scenario.
Okay, so if you speak up in a meeting and completely butcher a sentence, what actually happens in reality?
Right. You define the worst outcome. Maybe a colleague looks confused for 2 seconds.
2 whole seconds of awkwardness.
Exactly. Then you figure out how to prevent it. Maybe you prepare a few bullet points in advance. And finally, you figure out how to repair it.
You just say, let me try to rephrase that.
Yes. When you map it out logically on paper like that, the terrifying worst-case scenario is usually totally harmless.
But then you have to calculate the other side of the equation, right? The atrocious cost of inaction.
The status quo.
Yeah. If you let that fear keep you silent just to preserve your comfort, what does your life look like in a year or 5 years?
You miss promotions, you fail to make deep friendships, you shrink your world.
Yeah. There's that quote from the weightlifter and author Jerzy Gregorek: easy choices, hard life; hard choices, easy life.
I love that quote. It's so true. Choosing to stay silent is the easy choice in the moment, but it guarantees your life will be much harder and smaller in the long run.
So we have to radically reframe how we view mistakes. One of the language experts in our sources compared it to learning to walk as a child.
Right.
You don't scream at a toddler for falling down. You understand that they physically have to fall to find their center of gravity. Mistakes aren't final failures. They are literal feedback mechanisms for the brain.
It is the only way the brain calibrates to new patterns. In fact, the British Council research specifically warns us against adopting what they call the Homer Simpson mindset.
Okay, that is hilarious. What is the Homer Simpson mindset?
It's from that episode where Homer tells his kids, you tried your best and you failed miserably. The lesson is never try.
Oh my gosh. We laugh at it, but that is the exact subconscious logic anxious learners use to protect themselves.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the antidote to that mindset is rooted in modern positive psychology. Instead of solely focusing on trying to eliminate anxiety, which is a very defensive, exhausting strategy, we need to actively boost something called foreign language enjoyment, or FLE.
Okay, I have to push back here for a second, though.
Go for it.
It's super easy for a Stoic philosopher from 2,000 years ago to sit around in a toga and say, don't let events bother you. And it's easy to say, just enjoy the language.
Fair point.
But in the modern real world, when you're at a loud party and someone openly laughs at your pronunciation, or a server frowns at you because your accent is thick, it stings. It is a physiological hit to the ego.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do we practically brush that off in the messy reality of the moment?
That is a very fair challenge. And it requires us to redefine what confidence actually is. Confidence is not the absence of fear or embarrassment.
What is it then?
Confidence is the willingness to act despite the fear. When someone laughs or frowns, our amygdala instantly assumes they are judging our intelligence or our worth. But most of the time, they are simply reacting to the friction of human communication.
Like a momentary break in connection.
Exactly. It's a reaction to an unexpected sound, not a verdict on your soul.
Okay, so we have to separate the awkwardness of the moment from our own identity.
Yes, and that separation requires active training. You cannot just philosophize your way out of a biological panic response. You actually have to physically train your nervous system to stop treating a chat over coffee like a tiger attack.
Which moves us perfectly from the philosophy to the actual Tuesday morning reality. What does that physical training look like? How do we build systems that actually rewire that panic response?
Well, it all comes down to consistency over intensity. The brain adapts to a new language, through regular, small, low-stakes contact, not through rare, exhausting 3-hour grammar marathons.
Right, and the language channel English Unleashed breaks this down into a really brilliant 10-minute daily routine. And instead of just listing the steps, let's look at why they actually work biologically.
Let's do it.
So the first block is 2 minutes of listening to something slightly challenging, but without trying to translate it. You just absorb the rhythm, the tone, and the musicality of the language.
Followed immediately by 2 minutes of speaking out loud.
Yeah.
Even if you are completely alone in your room, you copy the pronunciation and the speed of what you just heard.
Which is crucial, right? Because speaking is a mechanical, muscular skill.
Exactly. It's very much like riding a bike or playing the guitar. Your mouth muscles actually need physical, repetitive training to produce new phones and sounds that just don't exist in your native language.
Okay, so that's 4 minutes. Then you spend 2 minutes personalizing the language. You take a phrase you just learned and make it about your own life or your own opinions.
Right, which forces the brain to move the information from passive, abstract memory into active, practical ability.
Make it real. And then 2 minutes of free talk. You just describe what you see out the window or talk about your plans for the day continuously without stopping to correct your grammar.
Because the goal here is flow. You are building the habit of keeping your voice moving even when you inevitably hit a bump.
And finally, 2 minutes of reflecting. What felt easy today? What tripped you up?
And that simple 10-minute routine is incredibly powerful solely because of the daily repetition. You are giving your nervous system consistent low-stakes evidence that producing this language will not kill you.
You're lowering the threat level.
Yes. And you can accelerate that with techniques from the sources like shadowing.
Oh, where you repeat audio out loud at the exact same speed as the native speaker, mimicking their exact intonation.
Exactly.
Now, the research also points to mirror practice and recording your own voice. And I have to admit, that sounds agonizing to me.
It sounds terrible, I know.
Like if I am already terrified of judgment, staring at my own panicked face or listening to my own stuttering voice on playback sounds like the absolute worst idea. Why would I subject myself to that?
Because, as the presentation experts at Slide Model point out, discomfort is data.
Discomfort is data. I like that.
Whether you use a mirror or a smartphone camera, watching yourself forces you to sync your voice with your body.
Yeah.
You might realize your shoulders are completely hunched up to your ears or you're staring at the floor.
So you become aware of the physical defensive habits that are signaling fear to your brain and undercutting your confidence.
Exactly. And once you see them, you can fix them.
Okay, I see the logic. Those are the daily training habits. Sure. But what about the in-the-moment biohacks? Like when the panic actually hits in a real conversation?
Oh, there's some great tools for that.
Yeah, the source from Speak Confident English had some amazing tricks to short-circuit the freeze. The first one is taking deep, slow belly breaths, which mechanically forces the heart rate down. But the second trick really caught my attention.
The toe curling.
Yes, curling your toes.
It sounds so strange, but it is an incredibly effective grounding technique.
Let's take it a step further. By pressing your toes hard into the soles of your shoes, nobody around you can see you doing it, but it gives your brain an intense physical sensation to focus on.
Right, it draws processing power away from the racing, anxious thoughts.
So, if I curl my toes, take a belly breath, and use a memorized framework, I am basically biohacking my amygdala. I am manually forcing my brain out of the emotional threat center and shoving it back into the logical executive center.
That is exactly the mechanism at play. And you brought up frameworks. That is another crucial tool for reducing that dual task burden we talked about earlier.
Right. Instead of trying to invent a complex sentence from scratch while your heart is pounding, you rely on a mental roadmap.
Yes. Like having a standard structure ready to go.
Yeah.
You know, here's my view on this, here's the reason why, and here's my suggestion.
Boom. Simple.
By building automaticity with these frameworks, you remove half the cognitive load.
Yeah.
You no longer have to think about how to structure your thought. You only have to drop the specific vocabulary into the pre-built slots.
So you stop translating word for word in your head and start speaking in chunks.
Exactly.
And when you inevitably do make a mistake or drop the wrong word into that slot, you don't freeze up and start profusely apologizing. You use pivoting phrases.
Yes, pivoting is key.
Things like, let me try saying that another way, or what I actually mean is native speakers do this constantly when they lose their train of thought.
They really do. Using a pivot phrase is a sign of fluency, not failure. It shows you are competent enough to manage the flow of conversation and correct your own course in real time.
I love that. But If the idea of practicing these techniques with real people is still causing your right hemisphere to demand a retreat, the research points to a very modern transitional solution: digital buffers.
Ah, yes, practicing with AI language tools or digital avatars.
Because an AI literally does not have the capacity to judge your social worth.
It completely neutralizes the fear of negative evaluation. It gives highly anxious learners a safe, anonymous sandbox. You can build up your conversational repetitions, make 1,000 mistakes, and train your mouth muscles until you feel biologically ready to face a human being.
Which is just incredible. Ultimately, it is all about framing your vulnerability as a strength rather than a weakness to be hidden.
Absolutely.
There is a great role-play script from the Idaho Training Clearinghouse about a high-stakes job interview. When the employer asks the applicant to talk about themselves, the applicant doesn't hide their language struggles.
Right. They own it.
They proudly state that they are in the process of learning a new language because they value cross-cultural communication.
Sure.
They use the struggle as live proof of their dedication, their adaptability, and their grit. They just own the messiness of the process.
And that is so powerful. So what does this all synthesize into for the learner listening to us right now?
Yeah, what's the big takeaway?
It means accepting that fluency is, by its very nature, a messy, imperfect process. You simply cannot reach fluency by remaining safely silent. The ultimate goal of language has always been human connection, not flawless grammatical execution.
Fear is entirely natural. Your brain is just trying to protect you. But courage isn't some magical trait you are just born with, you know? It is a habit that is built.
It is built in small, consistent 10-minute increments.
It is built by looking in the mirror, curling your toes, taking a deep breath, and choosing to speak anyway.
Because every single time you speak, despite the fear, you are giving your nervous system undeniable physical proof that you are safe and that your voice deserves to be heard.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today. If changing our perception of fear and practicing in small daily increments can literally rewire the brain's biological panic response to speaking a new language, what other terrifying barriers in your life are just a trust gap waiting to be crossed?
Oh, that's a great question.
Right. What other imaginary cliffs are you backing away from that would completely disappear if you just curled your toes, took a breath, and stepped forward?
That is the real power of doing the hard thing.
Keep practicing, keep making those messy mistakes, and keep connecting with the people around you. We'll see you on the next deep dive.